Welcome to the 2021 Bible Study Series coming from St. Colette Parish. My name is Dick Wright. We'll cover the second installment of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We'll start with the findings in each of the original 11 Qumran caves, as well as elsewhere. And you can see on the map to the left the location of different caves, as well as the location of Qumran. We'll start with Cave 4, which was the first cave that was uncovered. It was discovered by Bedouin treasure hunters in 1952, exploring next to archaeologists excavating the Qumran site. These Bedouin treasure hunters worked for the archaeologists, but during their free afternoons, spent time looting the cave. Number 4 is the most legendary cave. I said it was the first cave found. It's not. But it is the most legendary cave, containing 15,000 to 40,000 fragments of about 700 manuscripts, including parts of biblical and apocryphal books, biblical commentaries, works on Jewish law, prayers, and sectarian texts. Its fragments were in poor condition, among the most difficult to decipher. And the reason, as we'll see, that they were in poor condition is because they were not stored in the type of jars that scrolls in other caves were stored. The Habakkuk letter. Habakkuk means legal. This was found in Cave 4 in 1954. And before it was found, scholars assumed that major issues differentiating late antiquity were theological. Late antiquity Jewish sects were theological. However, this text, this letter, showed major issues to be legal. There are 6 different copies, all fragments, found, indicating it was a fundamental text for the Qumran community. About 20 issues in this letter highlight disagreements between the sect and its Jewish opponents. The letter speaks about we, you, and they, which scholars reconstruct respectively as the Essenes, that is the Qumran community, the we, the Sadducees, the addressees of the letter, the you, and the Pharisees, the they. Cave 4 also had fragments referencing Qumran. 3 references, as you can see, a blessing for King Jonathan, one of the few instances referring to a real person, believed to be one of the 2 monarchs from the book of Maccabees, praised by the Essenes. The Florigelium is an anthology referring to verses from the Bible. The common theme was the end of days, and it proves the Yahad, which the Essenes called themselves, their community. It proves that the Yahad served as the Essenes' replacement for the temple. And the 3rd fragment found were the ordinances, commentaries on certain biblical laws. For example, the Jewish tradition was that an Israelite give an annual contribution for the upkeep of the temple. The ordinances superseded this by a once-in-a-lifetime contribution, thus allowing the Essenes to withhold annual support from the temple, which they considered impure. It was a legalistic interpretation of that particular biblical law. Summarizing Cave 4, the importance, it yielded about 3/4 of the entire collection of texts from the originally excavated 11 caves. In addition, every other cave contained at least 1 copy of a text found in Cave 4. Now we'll go to the first discovery, found in 1946, Cave 1. 3 shepherds discovered 7 scrolls housed in jars in a cave near the Qumran site in 1946. It contained the War Scroll, the Pesher Habakkuk, the Genesis Apocryphon, and the Thanksgiving hymns, which we'll take one after another. None were destroyed because they were all housed in those special jars. Allegedly, the scrolls in Cave 1 were discovered by a Bedouin shepherd chasing a stray goat. Talk about serendipity. The initial Dead Sea Scrolls there changed the study of the Old Testament. The first scroll found in Cave 1, the War Scroll, mentions the sons of darkness, who are the pagans, all Gentiles, as well as other Jews that the Essenes disagreed with. There are 8 fragmentary copies, which were also found in Cave 4, confirming the importance to the Qumran community. The scroll provided rules for the holy war about to take place at the end of time. Victory is certain. There will be hardship, but God's enemies will finally be annihilated. God himself marches with his army of angels, and God begins the eternal reign of light. The army is the people of God, and the soldiers are volunteers called to fight the battles of God. God is the hero of the fight. He marches along with his faithful, accompanied by the army of angels. Also in Cave 1 was the Pesher Habakkuk, the primary source of pre-Christian history of the Qumran sect, written between 120 and 50 BCE, before the Common Era. It reinterprets the book of Habakkuk from the Old Testament, which was authored around 610 BCE, applying it to their present time. It also changes the text. The teacher of righteousness describes God's telling the prophet to write a vision for today's audience and what would happen next, but not when it would happen. The unidentified teacher of righteousness is the leader of the sect. He calls Rome, rather than Babylon, that bitter and hasty nation. The righteous shall live by faith was changed to the words having one's faith being directed through the teacher. Again in Cave 1, the Genesis Apocryphon was composed in Aramaic on 4 sheets of leather. Very unusual. Tiny fragments from Cave 4 may also be from this Genesis. It retells some of the Genesis stories, covering the span from Lamech, the father of Noah, to Abraham, and specifically describes Sarah, Abraham's wife, beauty. Aramaic having become the language of the Jews, Hebrew died out as a living language, probably ranging from 300 of the Common Era back to the 1st century before the Common Era. The Thanksgiving hymns were one of the first discoveries in Cave 1. There were 18 columns plus dozens of fragments, making it one of the longest scrolls. The document presents about 25 hymns of varying lengths, which begin with the words, "I give thanks to you, O Lord, Odeka Adonai." There's no evidence that this text was ever used in liturgy, But the content of the text reveals the community's thinking and theology. There's no appeal to the biblical texts that describe the conversion of the pagans to the worship of the one God, nor is there any reference to the Jerusalem temple, which was the focus of all the other Jewish sects at the time. Cave 2 is a bit like a silver medal at the Olympics. 30 fragments were discovered there by Bedouin in February 1952. It eventually yielded 300 fragments from 33 different manuscripts, including Hebrew fragments of Jubilees and the Wisdom of Sirach, which we will take in a few moments. You can see Cave 2, the arrow pointing to Cave 2. If you should ever go there and want to be able to see a cave without climbing up the dangerous mountainside, you can see Cave 2. Cave 3 was discovered and excavated by archaeologists in 1952. It contained the unique two-part copper scroll and fragments of 12 biblical and non-biblical scrolls, including the Qumran Calendar. This was the only scroll that was photographed in situ, meaning in its place. It was actually photographed within the cave itself. The copper scroll, which we'll talk about, is on display at the Amman Museum in Jordan and lists 63 treasures hidden in the Judean wilderness and Jerusalem area. The copper scroll in Cave 3 is the most enigmatic scroll ever found. It's the only scroll inscribed on copper containing a list of hidden treasures buried throughout the Judean wilderness and the Jerusalem area. It identifies hidden caches holding 63 treasures of gold, silver, copper, and aromatics. Further, evidence from the scroll indicates that Qumran's ancient name was Sakaka, one of the 6 desert towns listed in Joshua 15, verses 61 and 62. Cave 3 contained 3 biblical texts. Enoch, several copies in Aramaic, stating that Enoch, the prophet, did not die, Genesis 5:24, but rather is alive and can predict the future. Jubilees, there are 18 copies in Hebrew presenting Genesis and Exodus as revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai by angels. Ben Sira and Tobit, fragments that were found in various caves from late antiquity, written in Greek, but not the Hebrew originals. There were Hebrew copies found at Masada in the Cairo synagogue, which we'll cover. The Qumran Calendar in Cave 3 is an alternative calendar based on the solar cycle. It was developed in late antiquity, used by the Qumran community, clarifying why many scroll texts castigate the sect's opponents for celebrating holidays on the wrong dates. The standard Jewish calendar, on the other hand, that dominated for millennia was luni-solar, comprised of 12 lunar months, 354 days. Cave 5 was discovered and excavated by archaeologists in 1952. Fragments of about 25 parchment scrolls, all in Hebrew, were found there. Cave 5 is one of the estimated original 30 to 40 caves in what's called the marl, which is lime-rich mud, a terrace close to the site of the Qumran community, as are also caves 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Cave 6 was not used as a dwelling, but rather for storing scrolls. It's the most accessible cave. If you are there and wish to enter it, you simply follow the aqueduct, the wadi from the upper left-hand corner of that picture, traveling from Qumran in the upper left to the hills in the lower right. Caves 7 to 10 were discovered by archaeologists between February and April 1955. All the manuscripts in Cave 7 were in Greek, including a translation of Exodus. Cave 8 contained fragments of Genesis, Psalms, and a hymn, as well as food remains and oil lamps, which cause scholars to believe Cave 8 was used as a workshop. Cave 9 yielded a single papyrus fragment. One item was found in Cave 10, an inscribed potsherd, a pottery fragment. Cave 7, as we said, the manuscripts were written in Greek, including a Septuagint translation of Exodus. The Septuagint having been written in Alexandria by the Greek scholars. There's a fragment of the Epistle of Jeremiah dated no later than 100 BCE, which denied the reality of pagan gods and praised those Jews who did not worship idols. It purports to be written by Jeremiah to Jews about to be exiled to Babylon in the 6th century BCE. The cave collapsed after the scrolls were hidden. Cave 8, archaeologists discovered fragments of Genesis and Psalms and dozens of squares of small leather scripts. Again, scholars presume that a community worker lived there who had the task of making those strips. Cave 9. Together with Cave 7 and 8 is the only cave accessible by passing through the Qumran settlement. It was excavated by archaeologists in 1957, who found only a single papyrus fragment of the scrolls. Cave 10, archaeologists found only one inscribed potsherd. You can see the various potsherds pictured in the right-hand picture. Archaeologists call potsherds pottery fragments unearthed as an archaeological relic. Cave 11 contains the remains of 30 manuscripts discovered by Bedouin in 1956, including a few nearly complete scrolls. The most exciting find, as we said, was the temple scroll, the longest scroll, which rewrites the book of Deuteronomy and specifies regulations pertaining to Jerusalem and the temple. We've reached the end of this session. I want to thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.